this just came out 20th, so that's just yeah.
It's
So
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's the place to go to get information about Microsoft certifications and exam. It's one that
Okay.
I've registered to, so you can see. For example, let's go here. And welcome, Leon. How you doing? So we got Leon on the line also. Okay, so you can see the announcement here for new Azure exams. So it's not just
Yeah.
535. So for example, it used to be 533, and we had 534. So now they're like having different tracks. So for example, you have 533, 534, and you have
Mm.
this new exam called 539,
Wow. Okay.
and this one called 538. So these ones, they said they will come out next year. So
Okay.
according, yeah, so you keep reading this. Actually, let's make this a bit larger to see. And you keep reading this. They said, um, so although the exams won't be visible option on the web any longer, candidates can use 47383, and they keep going. So essentially, what they said was these two, 538 and 539,
Mm.
they are exams in development that they are looking to release next year. So,
Okay.
so once they release this, so you can see managing Linux workload in Azure. So these are really interesting topics for anyone doing anything with Azure. I personally, or myself, I will be looking to do. So I have done 532. I've
Okay.
done 533. I will
Okay.
be doing my 534 next week.
Okay.
That's my second trial. Did it last year, failed it. So, but we'll do it again next week. And then I will be doing 535 once it comes out,
Mm.
right? And then I will be doing 538 and 539 because this, I mean, this depending, I mean, I have a look and see what the content are, but this looks like something that I'm interested in learning, like implementing Microsoft Azure DevOps solution. That's something interesting to me. Managing
Okay.
Linux workloads on Microsoft Azure. That's something absolutely interesting to me. So I'll be looking at all them, but then it all depends on which track you're going. Microsoft tried to separate them to say, hey, if you're going DevOps, you want to do this one, then 534, then 538. If you're going architect, you want to do 533, then
That's where I want to go.
534. Yeah. So you probably want to go this track. So
Yeah.
then
The
you do
problem
five.
I have is, David, I don't use Azure daily because at my where I work, that we don't
Mhm.
have no cloud
Yep.
for nothing. So
Yep.
it is all self-learning and
Yep.
try and do it as much as I can. So
Yep.
that's why it's hard.
Yeah. So to me, that's like I think well, the way that I used to get around that. So now I work with Azure Daily now, right?
Mm.
But what let me see. The way that I used to get around that. Oh, so for example, I remember there was a time that I was in when I first going to PowerShell some years ago. Wasn't using PowerShell that often, right?
Mm.
But then what I used to do was I used to take tasks that have been given to me and I'll convert them to PowerShell by myself. So I just find a way to do so. For example, let's say I work with servers, I just go home and I'll say, okay, I'm going to do this project and I'm going to deploy it in Azure by myself and see how that works. Or I've been given a server to deploy. Okay, I'm going to see if I can automate the deployment of this one using PowerShell, even though I've not been asked to. And I just kind of turn whatever they give in to me around and make it link up with PowerShell one way or another.
Okay.
So I just kept using PowerShell, even though. So at the end of the day, sometimes I even go back to work and share some of the stuff to go, hey, look what I did with PowerShell, even though you did not ask me to do this, but that's what. So that's like one way around that. If you're not working daily with it, is to kind of find a way to like link it with whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
In one way or another. And then the other thing that could potentially help is just get a lab book and just do the lab book. So just follow the lab book, do it, follow the lab book again, do it, follow the lab book again, do it. So at least you have something to follow, like
So
when
what
doing it.
what lab book would you recommend? Are they
Um,
good lab books?
there's one by somebody called Cloud something that I bought. So I bought one on my Kindle. I can get that across to you. So it's for 534, it's for architecture, but it's like a pure lab book. It's just lab
Oh,
from beginning to
is
the
that
end.
by Harinder
Yeah,
Kohli?
that
Okay.
sounds familiar. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's
That,
one of the good ones that I've seen. I was
I know
actually
him actually.
Oh, that's nice. Because I was actually thinking of writing mine because there isn't that much that's just pure lab. I remember in those days when I used to be involved in Cisco, it's one of the ways that we mastered the Cisco technology, right? You
Yeah.
just get plain lab books and just do the labs. You just sit down and just do the labs. Sometimes it's like zombies. You're just doing the labs, doing the labs, doing the labs. Before you know
Yeah.
it, you get to a point where you don't need to open the book. You can just go type the command, go with the labs, because you've done it so much. And it seems as if this, because Microsoft has their own documentation, but still, I think there's extra that's needed beyond their documentation that will make things simpler and more compact. So,
Yeah.
okay, so I
His
think yeah, carry on.
his new book's coming out next month, I think, which is
Um,
not just the lab guide, but also a study guide for the 534 5 stroke 535 exam.
okay. Yeah, yeah, maybe I'm not too much like a fan of study guide. I actually prefer to read documentation than study guide. But when it comes to labs, I like lab books because it just gives me a framework to follow. Just follow this from A to Z. Follow it from A to Z. You master it, you just keep repeating, repetition. I thought you know it, you've mastered like the whole framework and stuff.
That's what I'll do then.
Yeah.
I'll order his lab guide from Amazon
Yeah.
and I'll go through it.
Yeah. Okay. So new exam 535 will be
Cool.
released, and you must so architecting will be available in English starting November 30th. So November 30th will be released. It's the last day that you can register for 534. So if you want to do 534, actually you have to register for it before November 30th. Otherwise, 535 will be released, and then that's what you have to take. Okay, let's move on today. Today we are doing Azure networking. And previously we've already covered some of the topics in this particular course by Microsoft.
Mm.
We've covered the introduction to Microsoft Azure. Now we'll move to Azure networking. So one of the main reasons why I like bringing this up at the
Mm.
beginning of every session is you absolutely have questions as I begin to go through this. You start having questions around, oh, what about this one? So the reason why I bring this up is to show you that we're not just stopping here. So don't worry, you're going to have questions that has to do with, okay, so what are you showing me about virtual machines? We'll get to virtual machines, don't worry. So I'm talking about networking and I bring up something relating to app service and you're like, oh, I don't know what that is. Don't worry, we'll get to app service. And it's the same thing. We'll get to database, we'll get to Azure Active Directory, we'll get to Azure Automation, we'll get to all of them. So
Cool.
you will have some questions as we go through, but we'll get to them eventually. And the ones that we can get to, I will try to make reference and mention that maybe it's not covered in this particular module, but it's covered in 534 or something like that. Okay, so
Cool.
implementing Azure networking. What are we going to be doing today? So number one, overview of Azure networking,
Mm.
implementing and managing virtual networks, configuring Azure virtual networks,
Yep.
configuring virtual network connectivity, and then overview of Azure networking in IaaS version 1. So we'll go through all that and what that means. So lesson 1, overview of Azure networking. One of the first things I would like to bring up is if you look at this PowerPoint, for example, we're presented with Azure networking component. And we have this component. We have virtual network, we
Yep.
have Azure DNS, we have application gateway, we have traffic manager, we have express route, we have load balancer. So these are all the components that we will be talking about in this particular module. Now, the course itself doesn't go into details about them because that's why it's divided into three, 532, 533, 534. But we will touch on all of them. Now, to add to that, let's go back to the web page. And what I'll do is I'll just type in Azure Services, and I'll bring up Azure Services here.
Yep.
And in bringing up Azure Services, let's go Directory of Azure Cloud Services. Let's click on that. And you can see here's a list of all the services that are available in Azure. But the one I'm going to do is I'm going to do the filter by category. I'm going to filter for the networking category. Yeah, so I'm going to filter for the networking category. And by the way, if you need to say anything, just unmute yourself. And then yeah. So if you need to say anything, just feel free to unmute yourself. So going to go into networking category, and here you see that this is very similar to what we just saw. So it go virtual network, load balancer, application gateway, VPN gateway. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Virtual network, application gateway, load balancer. So it's very, very similar what we're seeing here, and it's exactly the same thing. So the only difference is that you notice that there are some services that are listed here that you cannot find within this PowerPoint document. And that is because since the release of this course, there have been new Azure networking components that have been added. So what I'm trying to say is even the ones that you cannot see on this course, on this PowerPoint page, I will try to cover them um, in this particular module. So what we actually be doing is we go through virtual network, load balancer, application gateway, VPN gateway, Azure DNS, Azure content delivery network, Azure traffic manager, express route, and these are two new ones. So for example, you have Azure DDoS protection. This was just recently announced at Microsoft Ignite 2017. That was just last month. So this is a new service that just came out under the networking category. And this one was announced, I think, early this year, Azure Network Watcher. So we'll cover it also. So these are both new services that may not be on the PowerPoint page, but we will cover them. So perhaps the way that I'd like to start about with this one is let's just go create a virtual network in Azure and let's see what we're talking about here. So what I'll do is I'm already logged into my Azure portal, and there are different ways that I can start this. I can either go to the left hand side and I can see virtual networks here. So that's one way. In your own situation, if you do not see virtual networks here, because this is something that you can customize, so you can say I can drag this up, I can drag it down. So if you don't see this here, what you can do to get it there, you can go under more services, and under more services, just type in virtual networks. And then you see virtual networks here. If it's starred, it's going to appear here. If I remove the star, you see it's gone away from there. If I apply the star, you can see it's back there. Virtual Networks Classic is not there. If I select it, it's there. If I remove it, it's not there. So perhaps the first question is, what's the difference between Virtual Networks and Virtual Networks Classic? Anybody wants to answer that a bit? So Leon, you were here with me last week. Let's see if you still remember what we discussed last week. So what's the difference between Virtual Networks and Virtual Networks Classic? So what's your thought about that? So
Hi guys.
hi Leon. Yeah, can hear you.
Yeah. All right. So the difference with virtual networks and virtual networks classics is that classics are for backward compatibility, like the old Azure portal.
Excellent. Very excellent answer, Leon. So what Leon is saying is,
You got
again, carry
one's
on.
like AS, Azure Service Manager, and the other one's Azure Resource Manager, which is
Very
the new
good.
portal.
Very
Yes.
good answer also. Both of you, very, very good. You still remember from our previous session, so that's exciting. So exactly. Thanks very much for both wonderful answers. So
You're welcome.
we have virtual networks, virtual network classic, which is for the old one, for the old portal, and then this for the new one. So that's for backwards compatibility. So usually you focus on virtual network. So that's one way that you can do that. You can also go to the top search bar here, and you can just search for virtual networks. And then it's going to come up, and then you can go under services, you can see virtual networks there, and you can select it. So I'll just select it either from there or from here, it doesn't matter. I can drag this one back to where it was, and I can see the list of the current virtual networks that I have. So if I want to add a new virtual network, it's as simple as clicking on add, and once I click on add, it may take a while, it comes up with a menu for me to input some configuration items. So I can give the virtual network a name. So I'll call this Hangout VNet. Okay, so Hangout VNet. Now you have to give it an address space. The thing that we're essentially doing is this. Let's go back to Paint. And the thing that we're doing is this is within the Azure data center. You have all kinds of devices, right, that are powering this data center. What you're essentially doing is logically, you're carving out a part of this, you're carving out a part of this huge data center of Microsoft and saying, this is my own private network within the Microsoft data center. It's something logical. It's not physically isolated. It's logically isolated. But no one else can access this network and whatever you deploy into this network apart from you. That's what we are trying to do. And if you're interested in learning more, how they are able to do this. How are they able to carve out, like anybody in the world can just go and carve out a little space. So I can go and carve out my own network here, and it's 10.1, and I say my IP address space, I want it to be 10.1.0.0/16. And Leon can go also to go carve out your own virtual network within the same Azure data center, and you give it the same IP address range as I gave mine. And there's not going to be any conflicts. There's not going to be any issues with this one being able to talk out or the other one being able to talk out. I won't be able to access your virtual network. You won't be able to access my virtual network. If you want to understand more how that is possible, go do a bit more study, because it's beyond the scope of this module, on SDN, software defined networking. Especially two technologies, VXLAN technology and GRE. I've forgotten what the other one is. So let's go back to. So there are two competing standards. So it used to be VXLAN, and the other one is, I've forgotten what the other one is. GRE something. Let's go Control F, GRE, or let's go back here and just do VXLAN versus GRE, and it should come out. It's GRE something, so it's not just GRE, believe me. Versus GRE. They've got a proper name for it. You know what? I actually have this in one of my documents. So let's go back to this one. Let's bring up paper.dropbox.com. So if you want this just for just your own understanding, because the question may be going in the back of your mind if you're like me, how come I can just go create this network and it's not, you know, I can have the same address space as somebody else on exactly the same network. Because if you've been into networking, you go, oh, that goes against like all the all the things I've been learning with networking. So it's because of this whole concept of software-defined networking why that is possible. And yeah, there we go. It's MVGRE. Yeah. So
NVGRE, I just
yeah.
want
So that VXLAN versus NVGRE, and then you see. So and apparently, what's the name? Some one was being pushed by Microsoft and others. So you can see VXLAN was being pushed by VMware and others, while Microsoft was pushing MVGRE. And I think at the end of the day, they're kind of like VXLAN is kind of winning. So even Microsoft in Server 2016, they have a VXLAN implementation, not just MVGRE. So, but that's just beyond the scope of this one, but just for your knowledge as to how that's possible. Okay, let's move on to Azure configuration. So creating Azure Virtual Network, I've given it a name. I give it an address space of 10.10, 10.10.0.0/16. Every resource has to be in a resource group, or has to be contained in a resource group. So I can create a new one, which I will do. I'll create a new resource group. I'll call it Hangout VNet-RG for resource group. Select the data center that you want to deploy this virtual network into. So you can see the whole list that's available to us. I'll select West Europe and leave that. And now you can see. So let's go back to our whiteboard, which I'll bring up a new whiteboard here. And what it's telling me is that, listen, you cannot create this virtual network without defining at least a subnet within the virtual network, which is why it won't allow me to just create a virtual network. It's like, hey, define a subnet. So that's why I'm getting this. So I've got to specify. I'm creating this virtual network, and I'm giving it address space of 10.10.0.0/16, but it's saying specify a subnet, at least one subnet also. So that's what I'll go ahead and do. So I'll call this subnet, I'll call it Hangout VNet hyphen. Naming space is very important, but I'm sorry, naming convention is very important in the public cloud, by the way. So I'll call it Hangout VNet. I'll call it web app subnet, and give it an address range. So whatever address range that I give to my subnet has to be a sub address space of this main address space. So I've got 10.10.0.0/16 here. So rather, I'll just say this one is 10.10.1.0/24. That is a sub address space of this one. So, and that's okay. That's been accepted. And then I can just click on create. Before I click on create, there's an option here for automation options, which I think I mentioned the last time. Automation options is a way for you to, all the thing that I just configured now, I can deploy in an automated fashion. And what this one will do is it will give me the code, which is actually interesting, right? It will actually give you the code to create what I just created from the UI without you having to write the code yourself. It will give you the code in .NET, in Ruby, in Azure CLI. It will give you the JSON template also if you're using that. If you want to download it, you can download it. If you want to add it to your template library, you can. So it gives you other options there for automation, but I won't be doing that. And then I'll click on create. And that goes through the process. In the backend, what it's going to do is it's going to take this job that I've created, is going to submit it to the controller in the backend of the Azure Fabric. The Azure Fabric controller is going to submit that job, and the Azure Fabric controller will carry out that job. And once it's finished, it lets me know deployment succeeded. I can click on the resource. So if I go click on resource, now I can see my virtual network. So one thing I'd like to start with here, I have created a virtual network in Azure. What exactly have I done? Because here is the interesting thing about this. The interesting thing about this is there are many things that have happened in the background that we need to understand to be able to understand Azure networking. So what do I mean by that? When I was configuring this, it asked me to specify my address space, and I specified my name. My name is, sorry, I specified the name. So the name is Hangout-VNet, right? That's the name that I specified, and I specified the address space. Fine. Okay. And what else did they ask me to specify? It asked me to specify the subnet. So I said I wanted a subnet. I called it the web app subnet, and I gave it also an address space. So it's called web app subnet, and it's 10.10.1.0/24. So this is what I defined in the portal. But it created many things that I did not define in the portal. For example, when this was created, also a DHCP server or DHCP, I won't call it just a server, but a DHCP was also automatically created. Now, I didn't have to manually go click, configure DHCP, create DHCP. It was just part of the creation process that I have this DHCP. So, and what does that mean for me? What that means is if I start deploying my resources and I deploy a virtual machine into this subnet in Azure, I don't need to go manually configure an IP address to it because this virtual machine will automatically get an IP address from DHCP, but the DHCP is the DHCP of the Azure Fabric. It automatically created that in the backend. I didn't configure it, but it's part of what it's created. Now, within Azure, I'm not allowed to go to this subnet, deploy a Windows or Linux VM, and then configure it as a DHCP server. If I do that, does anyone know what will happen? Any idea what will happen? Yeah, Jitesh, any idea? If I go and create a server within my subnet and I enable DHCP in it in Azure, what will happen?
Well, you shouldn't really be enabling DHCP on your server because Azure has its own internal DHCP. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, which is exactly what we just said. Yeah, so it has its own internal DHCP. But what happens if I go anyway and I go to put a server in Azure, right? It's not as if, because you know, right? Of course, once you tell an IT person you can't do this, definitely somebody will try to do it, right? For sure.
Yeah.
So what happens if I try to do that? What will happen?
probably get some sort of errors.
It just won't work. So DHCP traffic will not go out of this virtual network adapter of this machine. It's blocked.
Okay.
So it just won't work. So
Well,
yeah, it just so that's it just won't work. So there's this DHCP that's been provided to us by the Azure Fabric as part of it. I didn't need to manually create it. Also, DNS was automatically created and configured for us. So there's a DNS server that was created when I created this VNet. I didn't have to configure it, it was just there. And what that means is if I deploy a VM into my subnet in Azure, what will happen is it's going to automatically get an address from the Azure Control DHCP server. It's going to get the address, and as part of the address, the Azure Control DHCP server will point it and say your DNS server is this DNS that I created. And all that happens automatically.
Yep.
Also, other thing that happened is there's a router. So I'm using just generic terms here, but it may not be exactly the way it's been described, but I'm just using generic terms so that you can understand. So there's a router here that was also automatically created for my subnet here. Automatically, I didn't have to create it and configure it. And this router has the first IP address of my subnet. So if my subnet is 10.10.1.0/24, 10.10.1.1 automatically is assigned to this router. Which is why if I go within this VM, I'll probably find this VM will get an IP address, but its default gateway, sorry, I may need to mute for the recording, but you can unmute if you say anything. So default gateway will be 10.10.1.1. How come it's using that as a default gateway? Because when this subnet was created, it automatically deployed this default gateway where the traffic will go if it's not within the subnet.
So is this the part where it's also Azure takes when on your subnet you have 4 IP addresses? The first IP,
Yep.
what IP, and the last 3 IP of the range is used by Azure. Is that correct?
So it's not only it's the first 3 IP addresses. So
okay.
yeah. So what we do is you have, so let's say you have 10.10.1.0/24 like I do.
Yeah.
So of course 10.10.1.0, that is the network address. So I can't use that anyway.
Yeah.
Network address, so I cannot use that. So Azure takes the first 3 usable IP addresses. So
Okay.
10.10.1.1 will be assigned to the router or the default gateway for that subnet. It uses 10.10.1.2 is going to take that. 10.10.1.3 is going to take that. And of course, the final IP address of this subnet, which is 10.10.1.255, that's not usable, right? That's
Right.
in a normal network, that's the broadcast address, right? In the normal network.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the address is going to take the first 3 usable IP addresses of that. And that brings a good question, because what that means is that the lowest subnet that you can use in Azure is /28.
Yeah, what you have no IP addresses.
Yeah. Or is it no? I think it's /29. Sorry.
29, isn't it? I think.
Let's see. No, it's /28. Oh, let's see. Yeah, I think it's /29. Sorry. So /29 will give you 8 addresses normally, right? So that's what /29 will do. So if I go back to this one and I go, let's go back and let's do subnets calculator. And let's say I go to use IP subnet calculator. Actually, I don't like this one. I prefer this one. Sorry, I may need to mute because of the recording. Yep. Yep. Okay. So if I go back here and I go 10.10 dot 1.0/24, but I make it /29 and I calculate that. So I get, yeah, so /29 means I get 10.10.1.1 to 10.10.1.6. So this is the lowest I can use, right? So I can only use up to /29. So what that will mean is 10.10.1, 10.1.0 to .7. So in this case, what that will mean is .0 is the network address, 123 is taken by Azure, .7 in this case will be the final one which cannot be used. So that means I only have .4, .5, and .6. So these are the only three that I can actually use. So I can only have three machines or three addresses in this subnet. So if I go any lower than that and I go to /28, /28 means I've got only four addresses. This is not enough. There's nothing else to use.
Yeah,
So you can only go up to /29. Okay, is that clear so far?
that's clear.
Yep. Leon, you're good?
Yes, I'm okay. I'm
Yeah.
just following.
Ah, nice. Okay. So let's move further here. So we've mentioned that a couple of things that were created in the background for us, right? We have all this stuff that were created for us in the background. And let's get rid of that. And we have this router. And all this was just automatically created. Let's go see some of them. So if I go back to my Azure portal, and let's bring the portal back here. And if I go back through, so I have the overview here where you can see general information about my address space, the name, the region, data center where my virtual network is, the subscription that's associated to, and I can go down here to my activity log. And my activity log, I can see administrative activities. So not activity going on within my subnet, but administrative activities. So activities that are going on within the underlying, let's say hypervisor level, right? Let's just say hypervisor level. So things like I just created a new virtual network. It says write virtual network. That was done by this user with this email address at exactly this time, and it's going to tell me the job that I submitted to the Azure Fabric controller. It's going to tell me this is the job that was submitted. So you can actually read the JSON file that was submitted to the Azure Fabric controller. Access control. So this is where I can specify who can access this resource, who cannot access this resource, and what they can do when they access this resource. So I can be as granular as possible. I can say you can create you can't create a subnet, but you can create this one. I can be as granular as I need to. So it's really, really good. So for example, if I go on the roles here, just to show you like a quick illustration. So if I go on the owner, and you can see it's inherited. If I go on the permissions of the owner, and you can see some of the stuff. If I keep going down and I go on the Microsoft compute, Microsoft network is what I want, not just classic network. So if I keep going down till I get to Microsoft network, is there a way to filter for that? Yeah, here we go, Microsoft network. And you see how granular we can get. I can say you can create an application gateway. No, you can read it, you can write it, you can delete it, other actions. So I can even go as far as saying you can create this DNS record. No, you can't. I can be as granular as possible. You can only create a load balancer backend address pool, but you cannot create a load balancer front-end address pool. So it can be as granular. It's a really, really good way to have control and governance over your Azure resources. And tags are also a very good one. These are becoming increasingly useful. So they're just a way for you to mark your resources in Azure. So I can say maybe department that's using this VNet. I can say the values department is IT or whatever project is assigned to. So then I can run a report based on the tag. I can, do some automation tasks based on the tags also. So it's a really good one and that you can use. So then we move on to settings. So where we have the address space. So I configured this, so that's understandable. What happens if I were to be running out of address space? Well, what I can do is I can add an extra address space. I can say if I'm running out of 10.10, I want 10.20.0.0/16 now, and save that. And then it's going to add that address space to my virtual network. So, and I'm not stuck. So I can always go back and delete this one if I want to. Connected devices, and yeah, let's cancel that. Let's save that first of all. Make sure that that's been applied by the Fabric controller. So that's done. If I go on the connected devices, I can see I have no devices deployed in any subnet, so there's nothing connected. Then I have my subnet here. So this was the one I created that I had to create when I was doing the deployment because it didn't give me any other option. I had to have a minimum of one subnet in the VNet. So now I can go ahead and create more subnets if I want to, which I'll do. I can go Hangout, I will just create Hangout VNet data subnet, create another one. We'll get to what network security group and root table are later. And I'll give this 10.10.2.0/24 and I'll click OK to that. And that's been submitted again and that's been created now. So what I've literally just done is this. What I've literally just done is I've again just created another subnet and is the data subnet. And I've given it not .NET, and I've given it an IP address space of 10.20, oh sorry, 10.10.2.0/24. So that's what I've just done now. And I can carry on creating as much subnet as I need to create as long as it's within this overarching address space for the virtual network. So that's the subnet. What about DNS servers here? So DNS server, you can see by default is set it to Azure provided DNS server. That's what I was talking about. When I was doing the configuration for this VNet, it didn't ask me to say, David, do you want me to create a DNS server for you? What do you want? It just automatically created it. As part of my deployment, this DNS server was automatically created. So, and I can change it if I want to. I can change it to custom. So what that will mean is, let's say I have this VNet and this subnet here. I can go deploy a Windows or Linux server into this subnet. Let's say it has an IP address of 10.10.1.4. That's the IP address. I can now go to my VNet configuration and say I want to change DNS server from using this Azure provided DNS server for the VNet to using this DNS server that's within my subnet that I've created that I will be managing. You can do that. And you can do that on a VNet level, or you can do it on a subnet level. I can configure that on the VNet level. I can go to individual subnet and or even I think individual VMs and do that on a VNet level, on a VM level, I think. So let's go back. So let's go. So if I go on the subnet here, I probably can do it on the subnet level, but I can do it on a virtual machine or virtual network interface level, I think, and we'll confirm that. So that's out of the DNS server. So if I wanted to, I could go custom. So the main thing that's needed is that whatever IP address that you put in there must be reachable. You can even use an IP address of your on-prem DNS server if you wanted to. Obviously, that's probably not a good idea, except you have a really, really fast, low latency network to your network connection to your on-prem network. But as long as the IP address of your on-prem network is reachable via some form of hybrid connectivity, you can use it as a DNS server. So let's go back to this one. So I'll leave it as the Azure default provided peering. So let's talk about this a bit. I have this virtual network that I just created. And then I'll bring up another whiteboard. So this is this virtual network that I've created here, and I'll make it a bit smaller. What happens if I go to deploy another virtual network? Because actually, by default, everything in this virtual network can talk to one another. Now we can change that, but by default, everything can talk to one another. Let's say for whatever reason, for compliance reason, for legal reasons, you have to either for, sorry, like compliance reason, security compliance or legal compliance, you have to separate out and ensure that there's complete isolation between certain resources in Azure. And you create a separate VNet. But isolation doesn't mean you don't want some form of connectivity. So maybe this new VNets that you create, maybe they need to authenticate to your domain controller that's within this VNet. What you can do, or what you had to do in the past, is that you have to deploy sort of like a VPN tunnel, IPsec tunnel, over the internet for these two to be able to get them to communicate to one another. So this is going to go out of Azure over the internet and then come back, and then they're able to communicate with one another. So that's changed now, because what you can now do is you can just pair them together. You can have a direct pairing between this virtual network and this virtual network so that you can have connectivity between them.
David, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
When you say peering, is that different from what used to be VNet to VNet connection, or am I completely doing rubbish?
So VNet to, what do you mean by VNet? VNet to VNet connection is pairing. So,
Okay.
but VNet to VNet connection can take different. So earlier when Azure first came out, there wasn't peering.
Mhm.
All you had was
Okay.
IPsec site-to-site VPN connection. So you
Okay.
have to deploy a VPN gateway, which will get to attach
Mhm.
this VNet, and you go to your other VNet and you deploy another VPN gateway right attached to this VNet, and then you have to create an IPsec site-to-site VPN connection across the both of them. So that's the way to get them talk to one another in the past. But now,
So
carry on.
would this happen if it's like if you have like example two VNets,
Yeah,
one in each different resource groups?
yeah.
So would you just do a peering, or is that the same situation that you're describing here?
It doesn't matter if they're in different resource group, as long as they're within the same subscription,
Okay.
you can pay them. Actually, let's go back here because I currently have some existing VNets. So let's go back. So for example, if I go under my resource groups, you can see I have a resource group here called the one I just created, Hangout VNet, right? And I have
Yeah.
my that's where my VNet is, Hangout VNet. And also if I go under Azure Test RG here, there's also a VNet here called, where is it? Where you VNet Azure Test RG VNet. It's a different resource group, right?
Yeah.
Now if I go back to my VNet here, and I go to select Hangout VNet and I go under peering, I can go to add a new peering, and I can give the name and say a Azure test to Hangout VNet, right? And the peer model is resource manager, so you can even peer in the classic model. So
Okay.
here's what I can do is I can say, hey, if I want to, I can say I know my resource ID and select that. Or I can just go choose my virtual network here. So if I click choose my virtual network, you can see I can see virtual networks that are in different resource groups. So
Oh, okay.
resource groups doesn't matter. Actually, last month, that's one of the things with this cloud technology. Last month at Microsoft Ignite, Microsoft announced an improvement to VNet peering. So before, the limitation to VNet peering is that they had to be in the same region. So this VNet has to be in West Europe, and this one has
Yeah.
to be in West Europe. If this one is in East US and this is in West Europe, I cannot pair them. But
Okay.
Microsoft announced at Ignite last month that now you can pair across regions.
Oh,
So
that's really good.
you can have a VNet, yeah. So you can have a VNet over here that's in East US, another VNet that's in West Europe, and you can get them to pair with one another. So that's in the, if you go to um, Ignite 2017 networking announcements, and you go look into that. So there's a nice blog um, here, and if you go Control F peering, and let's go down a bit. So global virtual network peering. So now you can pair across regions, right? So
Wow,
this
that's
is
cool.
something that, yeah, and they describe it in more details there. So this is something that just from last month. So, and you can see where that is. And that when you're talking about peering, right? One of the advantages of peering over IPsec tunnel is this is high bandwidth, low latency connectivity.
So is this
Going
all
through
done in the backbone from the
exactly going
Azure?
through the backbone of the Azure network.
Ah,
So
wow.
that is what peering is. Peering, so VNet peering in Azure, VNet peering in Azure, it's low latency, high bandwidth network connectivity via the Azure fabric. So so once paired, connectivity, so virtual machines are paired. Traffic between the VM in the paired network is routed through the Microsoft backbone infrastructure.
So
Much
you're no
like
longer
traffic is
dependent
routed.
on your internet connection and
Yeah,
IPsec,
yeah,
which is much slower than obviously
yes,
this will be.
yeah. And
Wow,
which again, remember that the whole point is that this is what? Rooted.
rooted.
The
Yeah,
other one is tunneled, right? Yeah, it goes
yeah.
through an IPsec tunnel, and one of the benefit is this. So the benefit is it goes through the Microsoft backbone network, no public internet or gateway involved. And the other or the main benefit for me is this other one, which is a low latency, high bandwidth connection between resources in different virtual networks.
And
So
plus,
this
I
is one
think
of the benefits. Yeah,
those who are not networking, if you have gurus, you can do this
yeah,
quickly and efficiently. This is brilliant.
yeah. It is. It is. So yeah, so that's the thing with pairing. So and again, we may not be able to go into much details about this ones, but just no. So you have all these
Uh,
different options. Hey, carry on, Leo.
sorry, Dave.
Yeah,
You said VNet pairing is only applicable when it's under the same confirm.
under what? The same subscription, yes.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that's the so if I go back here, so let's go back to the VNet pairing document here, and let's go to limits. Um, So there are limits on the number of pairings here. Of course, there are limits there. But then also, from what I'm aware of, I could be wrong actually. No, I could be wrong because it says here, it says I know my resource ID. Enter the full resource ID, for example, subscriptions. This is an interesting thing actually, because I've not seen this one before. So does this one mean that I can go across to a different subscription? Because for example, every resource I create in Azure has a resource ID. And you can see, for example, a sample of the resource ID here. So the resource ID includes the subscription ID. Does that mean that I could use VNet pairing across subscription? I don't think so from what I know, but I could be wrong. Let's say VNet pairing across subscriptions. So let's see. Cross subscription. Yeah, actually. um, so there is cross subscription virtual network pairing. Yeah. So virtual networks that are created through the Azure Resource Manager model and classic deployment model, but belong to different subscriptions, can now be paired through this preview release. So create a new, yeah, it is possible. So that makes sense because that is what this one is for. So what you need to do is you need to get the full resource ID of that VNet from wherever subscription. So I can go get what's it called? So if I go to my resource. Actually, you know what? You can get that via PowerShell. So I can go to my resource and I can get the resource ID of this resource, and then I can pair it with a resource that's in a different, and that's the resource ID there also. So because if you look at the resource ID and you try to break it down a bit, the resource ID actually um, contains information about the subscription ID. So you have the subscriptions forward slash subscription ID. So it's able to identify the subscription from there, and then it goes down to resource group and then specifies the name of the resource and then the provider of the resource, so it can identify it even across subscriptions. So there we go. We can even across
Ah,
subscriptions.
nice.
Yeah. So the only limitation is the numbers according to this document from Microsoft. So the only limitation is there's a network limit as to the number of VNet peering that you can have. So VNet peering per subscription, I think it's the default limit is 10. If you need to, you can contact Microsoft and they can increase it to 50. So that's the only limitation. That's very good. I didn't know that before. That's like excellent. Okay. Any questions so far, or we move on to to the other ones? Actually, you know what? The time is 7 o'clock now, because as we always do, let's take a short 10 minutes break, and then let's come back to continue. So let's go grab a cup of tea, cup of coffee, let's take some rest, and then let's come back to continue. Okay?
That's good because my wife's calling me for dinner, so I'm going to quickly eat and come back.
No problem. Yeah. Start recording. Okay. So actually, during the break, I just did a quick read through. So it is possible across accounts to do Azure VNet peering. So they gave an illustration here, different deployment models or different subscriptions. So here's how to do it. So again, as we thought, that's what we need. We need the information about the resource. We need the information of the resource ID. But then the other thing that we need also, if you're going to be doing that, is there must be an account that will have the account that will be configuring peering in the other account must have network contributor access within your within that VNet. So that's one thing you need to know, is that within your VNet, you must add the other user that will be configuring from the other account. You must add them as a network contributor role. They need at least that permission to be able to, for you to be able to set up different account VNet peering. Okay, so going back to where we stopped, let's bring up our virtual network. So let's go back to this one. So yeah, so that's what peering does. And properties is just basic information like the resource ID, the resource group, the subscription. If you're going to try to change the subscription here, you can. So subscription is mainly for billing. But if you notice that if you're going to be moving the subscription, so let's say I want to move this to a different subscription, I will need to specify the resource group that I'll move it to. So I'm actually moving the resource group that's this and that this resource is contained in. So locks is a good one. I remember I showed Leon a demo of this last week. So lock is a way to ensure that your resources are protected from accidental deletion. And the illustration I showed was I can go add a lock and give it any name. So for example, I can make this resource read-only, or I can provide it from being deleted. So read-only means I'm not only protecting it from being deleted, I'm protecting it from being modified. So if I go read-only, for example, and I say read-only lock, and I give a note and say ensures no one can modify my VNet. And then if I click OK to that, so I've added this read-only lock. Now if I go back on the subnet and I go to add a new subnet and I call it Hangout VNet test lock, and I give it an IP address of 10.10.3.0/24 and I click OK to that, I'll get an error message. And the error message is essentially telling me, listen, this is locked. You cannot perform a write operation because this resource is locked. So that's what locks are for. The other thing I can also do with lock apart from this one is to protect this resource from being deleted. So not only making it read-only, protecting it from being modified, I can go and add another lock and call it delete lock and give it the lock type of delete and say ensures no one can delete my VNet, and I can click OK to that. And then what will happen is if I go back to this, if I go click on my VNet and I try to delete it, even though I'm the owner of this VNet, it says, listen, you cannot delete it because it's been locked. So that's what locking is for on Azure resources generally. So I'll go remove my two locks so I can carry on. I just need to click this and delete them. That's the way to delete them. Click those three buttons there and delete, and I can get rid of the locks. Automation script is the one that we talked about. So this can give me like the script that I can use to automate this, the whole process of creating this VNet, right? So it's the whole concept of infrastructure as a code. And again, we'll talk more into this one when we get to Azure Automation, module 11, the final module. And diagram is another cool thing that will just show you what your current VNet, what it looks like. So because I have nothing connected, if I had anything connected, it will show me the different subnet and what is connected on that subnet in a diagrammatic way. So just show me a picture of here's the current connections to in this VNet. So I can see I have my web app subnet 10.10.1, my data subnet 10.10.2. And if I want to raise a Microsoft support request, I can raise it directly from here. Be a bit careful about raising support requests because they can be chargeable. So depending on what sort of subscription you're using, it's not just, oh, I just raise a request. Actually, you can, they are chargeable. So you get charged for the request. So you can raise a request directly from there and tell Microsoft the issue, and somebody from Microsoft will indeed look into your issue and try to help you. Okay, so that's for the VNet. There are other things that happened within this VNet that, back to this one, there are other things that happened within this VNet apart from this. So again, that means as we created this one, there's also a router for this subnet. And does anyone know what the IP address of this router or default gateway will be for this subnet? Anyone? What will it be? 10 dot Leonard dash. Anyone? What's the IP
10
address?
dot 10 dot 10 dot 2
Yep.
dot 1.
Excellent. And why is that? Why is it .1?
Because it gets the it gets the first IP.
Excellent. Excellent. So it's just the first IP. So it has that. So what about traffic flow? The other thing that happened when this VNet was created, that I didn't have to create or configure, that happened automatically in the background, is that there is an internet gateway for this machine to go out to the internet. That was created. I didn't need to create that. There's an internet gateway, and I cannot configure this internet gateway. I can't log into it to configure it. It was created automatically. And what will happen is, by default, by me just creating my VNet with my subnet, if I go to deploy a machine into my subnet, without me doing anything, my machine can go out through its default gateway router and go out through the internet without me having to do anything again. I will not need to make any extra configuration. All these were part of the deployment of the VNet. Now I can change the behavior around, as we'll see as we're carrying on in this module. We'll see how we can change the behavior around, right? How we could have proper security, proper network security appliance like a Sophos firewall in the middle. So things like that, we'll go through that. But just know that by default, this is the behavior. If I go to deploy any machine, so let's say I decide to deploy another machine into my data subnet, and it gets the IP address of 10.10.2.4, automatically this machine, without me doing anything, can access the internet through the router and can access the internet. Also, without me doing anything, this machine over here can talk to this machine over here. Why this machine over here can also talk to this machine over here? Actually, talk to is a strong term. Can root is a proper term. Can root. Routing is a proper term. Which means this machine, I can go ping 10.10.1.4. If I don't have any some of firewall rule or network security group, which we'll talk about next, that's blocking this machine will be able to perfectly locate where this one is and be able to talk to it. And this one will be also able to locate where this one is and be able to talk to it. There's routing across these two by default without me doing anything. And of course, they can also talk to the internet gateway if they want to go out to the internet. And all that are taken care of by default. So I can change the whole process. And let's see some of that. Let's see some of that. Because here's one of the things that happen is that actually, let's go see it first before we say anything. So for us to be able to see it, let's go do what I just had there. I'll go deploy a machine into my web app subnet, and I'll deploy another machine into my data subnet. So let's see. Let's go on the virtual machines, and I'll add a new virtual machine. And forgive me if you're a Windows person, I'll be adding a Linux virtual machine. How many of you have heard that Microsoft likes or loves Linux is the term?
I have.
Yep.
I'm a strong Linux user myself, so yeah.
Microsoft absolutely. So you go, Microsoft loves Linux. Microsoft apparently loves Linux now. Of course, if the majority of of servers in the public cloud are Linux server, you better love them if your business is
Yeah,
public cloud.
the tools are
So if your business is public cloud, you better love them if the majority of servers in public cloud are Linux. So Microsoft absolutely love Linux now. So I'll just put an Ubuntu machine. So let's go get an Ubuntu machine. And I'll deploy one into my web app subnet, one into my data subnet. So what I'll do is I'll go on the this one. I'll select the latest one, 17.04, and click create. So let's give them names. So name web app VM. Disk SSD, that's all right. Username. So for the username, I can't use admin for this. If I try to use admin, it won't allow me. So I will say this username is not allowed. So and I can go root. I'll say yeah, this username is not allowed. So I'll just specify something. I'll call it Azure admin. And I can either upload an SSH public key here, or I'll use a password. For now, I'll use a password. When we get to the VM module, we'll talk about uploading your SSH public key and stuff. So subscription, I'll leave it at that subscription. Resource group, I'll just put everything in one resource group because it allows me to be able to delete them easily if I want to. I just delete the resource group and all the resources are deleted. So I'll leave the location as West Europe and I'll click OK to that. So I can't have a resource in West Europe and have the VNet in East US. That's not going to work. They've got to be in the same data center, right? So I just specify something really small. I want the smallest one I can get. Well, not the smallest one exactly, but something not so expensive. One CPU, 3.5 gig, that's enough. And in this sense, I will leave almost everything as the default apart from two configuration. Number one is the configuration of the public IP address. You can see that by default, when I'm deploying this VM, it's attaching a public IP address for me. It's saying I have a dynamic public IP address. I'll call it this one. I don't want that, right? I don't want that because what it's trying to do is saying I have this public IP resource. And as you're deploying this VM, your VM will have a virtual network interface that assigns to it. This virtual network interface, by the way, in Azure, it's a separate resource. But we'll talk about that a bit more later. So that's a virtual network interface assigned to it. What I will now do, what Azure is trying to do by default, is that it's going to create a public IP resource that it's going to associate with this network interface card. But that's not what I want. Right? For now, and I'll show you why that's not what I want. So I don't want this for now. I don't want it to have any public IP because what I want to show to you, or what I want to be able to show to you is that without any public IP associated, this machine can talk out to the internet through its router, through the internet gateway, out to the internet, without me having to associate any public IP to it. So I'll say public IP, none. So it doesn't get any public IP. Network security group. So this is another important one. Network security group. If I click on that, by default, it says, I'm going to create this network security group. I'll call it Web App VM NSG. And by default, I'm only going to allow SSH port 22 to it. And that's because it's a Linux machine. If it were to be a Windows machine, it's only going to allow RDP, which is, as I say, TCP 3389. So what it's trying to do is this. It's going to attach sort of like this mini firewall rule to this network interface card. Again, remember, notice that I'm not saying to this VM, I'm saying to this network interface card. It's important that you note that network security group, public IP are assigned or associated to network interface cards, not to the VM. Because if you decide to have multiple network interface cards, you see the importance of that. It's not to the VM, it's to the network interface card. And Jitesh has a question.
Yeah, question. So does that apply to the subnet as well, NSGs, or is it only the network card?
So this one that I'm creating, it's been assigned as I'm creating the VM. So this is going to be assigned to the network interface card only, to nothing else. Nothing else in this subnet will get this network security group. Now,
Okay.
I can go back to create a different network security group and assign it to my subnet.
Okay.
Right? I can go to do that.
Mm.
I can also assign it just to my network interface card.
So then, what would happen, David, if you have two rules which are conflicting? Which rule would win?
Good question, and we'll talk about that.
Okay.
There's a whole slide that we'll go through that will cover how this is calculated. So, yeah. Okay. So, to this one. So, just remember again, so we have this network security group I'm attaching to this one. Actually, just a quick key point to mention here. Actually, network security group, even though you can associate one to a subnet, it's not actually assigned at the subnet layer. Network security group is always assigned or associated at the network interface level. The only difference is if I associate it to the subnet level, it's going to ensure that this network security group is associated to every network interface that's connected to that subnet. So it's not as if there's an appliance here that's doing firewall checking on the subnet level. That's not what network security group is. Network security group is always on the network interface level. It's kind of like a VM NIC. If you're from a VMware background, it's kind of like a VM NIC, and you're saying on the VM NIC level, on the hypervisor level, before you actually enter the network interface, I have this check. So it's not an appliance on the network level. To get an appliance on the network level or subnet level, you have to use a third-party firewall like Sophos firewall. So, but to carry on, so this net just one that will only allow SSH. Only SSH will this allow. And this again, remember, this is going to assign this to this. Now, this may be a trouble for me because maybe what I want to do is I want to be able to show you some tests that I can ping from this one to this one by default. But now, as I'm creating this by default, is assigning this network security group that will only allow SSH. It won't allow ICMP. So I won't be able to even ping here. So for now, again, I will take away this one. I don't want, I'll remove the network security group. So we'll add them and we'll talk about them later. But for now, I'll take that away also. So what I'll do is I'll close this and I'll go network security group and I will just go none, assign none. Extension, we'll talk about on the network on the virtual machine section. And I think actually the question that you asked may be on the virtual machine section. So enable auto shutdown, I'll switch this all off because I'll delete everything at the end when I finish. Monitoring and diagnostics, again, we talk about this on the virtual machine section. I'll disable it for now. I just want a VM that I can just use to show you some network stuff. So I'll click OK to that. Actually, there's something that I missed because I think there's an option that I can go back to. and I can select the number of instances that I want. If I go on the size and go on the basics, maybe not here, maybe not here. So let's carry on. Let's move on. Let's move on really quickly. View all, come on. Let's carry on. Select that, click OK to that. Optional features, no public IP, no network security group. I'm going to deploy it into which subnet, into the web app subnet, and everything else looks like I want it. I click OK to that. It's going to validate and make sure everything is okay, and then I can click create. So what I can also do is actually I can show you this one now. I can download template and parameters, and I can add it to library just to show you something. So I'll just say Ubuntu deploys Ubuntu server, and let's get rid of that. Let's go deploys Ubuntu server, and I saved the template, so I can refer to that template later. So I've saved the template. Good. I can go close this one now, and I can go create template, create deployment. So now it's starting to deploy my VM. So what I can do is I can quickly go back on the more services, and I can search for templates here. And I can see templates here in preview. So I click on templates, and I should be able to see my Ubuntu deploy template. So I can click on that to view my templates. And what I can do is scroll all the way up. So I have my parameters. So let's go back down. And this is the template that will deploy this. So let's go back. So what I can do is I can go edit this template. Come on, it's a bit slow now. And I think we're getting to, oh, no, and allows me to edit the name. Let's go back. Actually, you know what? I'll just click on deploy there. It's doing a lot of stuff. And then I just click on deploy there, and you can see it's because the template has a lot of parameters in it. So I can just use this to deploy my next one. Again, this is now kind of like the easiest template to work with because it has a lot of parameters, but we'll get to that later. So what I'll actually do is I'll cancel this, and rather than start typing in parameters one by one, I'll just go deploy the VM quickly, and I'll call this data VM. So let's go Ubuntu. Let's make it quick. Create data VM username Azure admin. There's no section in this course really about Azure ARM templates, but I'll try to cover at least some introduction for you. So I'll put it in the same resource group, Hangout VNet, leave it in the same data center or in the same region, and click View All to expose all the different VM sizes. So I'll select DS1 V2, select optional features. I'll do it's a similar thing, but rather than put this one in the web app subnet, I'll put it in the data subnet. So change it to data subnet. I don't want any IP addresses, so I'll click on that and select none. So watch out for default settings in Azure. It's going to create this network security group by default to only allow SSH. I don't want that, so I'll change that to none. I do no extension for now. Disable auto shutdown, disable monitoring, or boot diagnostics, and click OK. validation complete, create, and it's going to create it. So let's go back to on the virtual machines. At least I have my Ubuntu web app VM is running now. So what I'm going to show you, going to be able to show you is that this machine, this web app VM that I just created, its IP address is 10.10.1.4 by the way, or it should be, because that's the first IP that's available in that subnet. So if I go on the networking, on the interfaces, I can see that's 10.10.1.4. So should be able to get out through the network interface, out to the router, out to the internet without me doing anything. And that's because it's going out through this internet gateway that was created when I created this subnet, this VNet. And routing is automatically configured. I can't log into this one and start modifying anything. It's all automatically handled, but I can modify it. But what I want to show you also is why that's working. So let's go to this machine. Let's go down here and I'll go on the network interface first of all. So let's select this network interface and I'll go on the effective route. So this is where I'll probably stop for today. So let's go on the effective routes. And look at that. There are some default routes that were automatically created. I didn't do anything. I didn't configure them. These were automatically created. And look at what it says. Let's analyze these rules together for some minutes. Number one rule, let's make this larger so that you can see it clearer. Okay, I think there's a way that I can maximize this one. Can I not maximize this one? Oh, I can't maximize this one. Okay, so we'll go slowly. Default, source is default. So when you see source default here, what they call it in Azure is they call them system routes. And these are default routes. And these are routes that are added automatically by Azure when you create your VNet. If you don't make any changes, they are automatically created. So called system routes. And it says the state is active. And 10.10.0.0 and the next up is virtual network. Now 10.10.0.0/16, if you recognize this, this is the address space of my VNet, right? 10.10.0.0/16 and the next up is virtual network. What this one is defining is this. It's defining what I just showed you here. This automatic connection between all these routers, that's what it's showing you. It's saying if this machine, because I'm looking at the effective route for this network interface card, and it's saying to this network interface card, if you want to send anything, 10.10.0.0/16 to any subnet within this VNet, see, send it to your router and your router will route it locally. In other words, they will route between the virtual network themselves. The virtual network routing will take care of that. That is what virtual network stands for. When it says next up, it's talking about virtual network, just this virtual network routing. I can go, which we'll talk about later, I can go modify that and say, listen, anything that's within 10.10.1.0/24, which is your own subnet, I want you to route that to the virtual network. But anything else that is 10.10.0.0/16, I don't want you to route it to the virtual network because I don't want all these ones communicating without a firewall between them. I can put or deploy a Sophos firewall, for example, in the middle here. And then I can say anything that's going in between them goes through that Sophos firewall. And say anything that's now going to 10.10.0.0/16, don't send it for VNet routing, send it to the firewall and let the firewall handle the routing. So I can modify that, but this is the default. The default is everything in the VNet can talk to one another. And that is because of that system route that I just showed you. That system route that says anything 10.10.0.0/16, it's virtual network. There's another one. Again, it's default, it's active, It says anything 0.0.0.0/0, which is default root. That is anything you don't know about, anything else, default root, send it to the internet. What's it referring to? It's referring to this one. It's saying, listen, anything that comes that doesn't match this one, again, we'll talk about it because I know you touch me have the question about what about the flow? What if there are conflict? We'll talk about that. So anything that's by default, it's saying anything else that is not within your virtual network, send it to this internet gateway. Let it handle it for you. That's why by default, this machine can go out to the internet. If this machine has been configured to talk to some form of update server, as we're talking right now, it's speaking to the update server successfully and it's getting replies. Because by default, 0.0.0.0.0, I'm sorry, /0 goes out to the internet. Again, I can change that also. I can say, don't send it to the internet. I want to filter what you're sending out to the internet. So I can go and say anything going to 0.0.0.0/0, send it to my Sophos firewall, for example. I keep using Sophos firewall because that's what I use. So send it to Sophos firewall, for example, and anything that's now going now, it won't just send it straight out there. It will send it to the firewall, which will now inspect the traffic before sending it to the internet gateway and outside. But this is the default behavior, and that is the reason. So you can see other behaviors like 10.0.0.0/8, none. In other words, these are black hole. This won't go anywhere. So this machine cannot communicate with anything 10.0.0.0/8, and these are the private IP address ranges. RFC 1918. It's like, no, I can't. The only difference is 100. And I'll see if Leon still remembers what is 100.64. What's the IP address range for?
Hello?
Remember? Hello, Leon. Remember? 100.64. What's it for?
100.64. Is it the one for ISPs?
Exactly. So it's just one for ISP. So that's why it's on this
I had
list.
to check the bottom first.
So yeah, so it's one that it's just reserved for ISPs. Because when I first saw this, I remember it came out. I was like, yeah, I understand 10.0. That's private IP address range, right? 172, I understand that's private IP address range. Private IP address range.
Exactly.
What is this 100 that you're talking about? Because Microsoft use 100 within their own network. So
Oh,
because because Microsoft is essentially an ISP, right?
oh,
Yeah, they are. So because their Microsoft One network is kind of like an ISP network. So it's like,
oh.
yeah, anything private IP address range and 100 black hole. So none, none, none. So we can modify this by using something called user-defined routes. So these are system routes. The other type of routes that you have in Azure, and this is where we'll stop for today, are something we call user-defined routes. And what I can do is I can create a user-defined route and assign it or associate it to subnet. And I can associate this user-defined route to the subnet so that everything within the subnet, now I can override the behavior of the routing. So rather than you going straight and being able to route to one another directly, I'm sending you to a firewall for security purposes or whatever. And I can now start overriding this behavior. So is that clear, or are there any questions? Because we'll stop here for today. You may be thinking, David, but you've not proved to us that this machine can talk out to the internet yet without doing anything. So what I'll be doing next week, which I promised Leon this last week, but because I didn't do the recording properly, I had to do it again. So hopefully the recording is good this time. So what I'll be doing next week is I'll have my machine, this machine that I'm currently recording from, I will have this machine and I will connect this machine to my Azure VNet via point to site VPN. So you see how to do this next week. So point to site VPN. I'll take this machine that I'm currently recording on right now, this one that I'm on right now, and I'll connect this machine to my Azure VNet by creating an Azure VPN gateway here. So we saw that from our list here. So Azure Virtual Network, Azure Application Gateway. So it's not on here, but let's go back to the services that we saw earlier. Azure Services, let's go back here. And one of the services that we have is VPN Gateway. So we'll create an Azure VPN Gateway, right? And I'll connect my machine that I'm talking to you from, connect this to this VPN gateway, so that now my machine can talk internally to this virtual machine that I just deployed. So this machine will be able to talk internally to the VPN gateway, again by default, because routing will instantly be configured. Because without doing anything, they will just do virtual network routing. They'll be able to talk, everybody will be able to talk to everybody by default. So this machine, I'll be able to SSH internally to the private IP address of this machine. And then after I SSH into it, I'll now be able to show you that without associating any public IP address to this network interface, this machine can go out to the internet. And then we can now begin to see how we can start taking control of these default behaviors. What's the reason why we use the public IP anyway? Because otherwise, if you just try to create a VM in Azure, it's going to try to give you the public IP by default. So you have to control this and no, I don't want any public IP for this one. So why then do we have public IP? So all those kind of things, we start taking control of that from next week. So any questions at all regarding what we've discussed today? Or will you say that it's carry on?
I have a question, David.
Yeah.
Right. What we've done in this session,
Yeah.
if we want to sort of like practice it ourselves,
Yeah.
what do you recommend?
Good question. Good question.
I think theory is a good thing also, but practice will be good as well.
So actually, you know what? At the end of it, we actually have a practice because we're following the Microsoft official course. So at the end of this, so actually, because I'm going to follow this one. So I know I'm not going through the slides, because if I go through the slide, it'll probably be boring for you. And imagine, how am I going to go through this one, right? I mean, everything that we've been talking about, we've only been talking about virtual network, a little bit of Azure DNS, right? What else? Let me bring up the complete one. So we've talked about virtual network, a little bit of VPN gateway, and a little bit of Azure DNS, and few, sorry Jitesh, I may mute you again just for the recording. If you want to ask any question, just unmute. Yeah. So, I've just talked about like these few things, and look at the amount of time we've spent. So if I just go through the slides and just try to rush that, you probably won't get that much out after this, which is what many people feel when they go for the course, right? Things are just rushed through, you don't really get any really useful information. So at the end of it, there are labs. Luckily, the labs are available on GitHub. So that's what we'll probably do. I think we can probably pick maybe the third session or something where we just sit down and we just do the labs together. So you have your VM up, I have my VM up, we just sit down and just do the labs and we record it. We don't do anything else. And that will be if I search 2533 GitHub. So the labs are available on GitHub, provided that the machine have been set up correctly, as we discussed. So I'm not sure my machine is having trouble. Okay, yeah, there we go. So Microsoft Learning, and then you can go under here. So you can see under instructions, I think, and you can see. So these are instructions, and you can see I can go lab O2, which is the module 2 that we are on, and you can see what the lab setup is. It's going to take 30 minutes, and this is what we're doing. We're deploying a VNet from the Azure portal. We create a virtual network using PowerShell. We'll create a virtual network using Azure CLI. We'll configure VNet peering. So we'll go through this. So if you want to ahead of time, just Google 2533 GitHub, and then you see the Microsoft Labs in that GitHub. But we'll also do it as part of this module. Is that clear?
Yeah, that's clear.
Yeah. Jitesh, you can unmute yourself, sorry. I just keep muting so that the sound doesn't affect the recording. That's why I keep muting you. So, but you
Yes.
can only, yeah.
It's clear for me. So what I'll do, I'll go for this 205533 and I'll have a look as well.
Yeah.
And I'll get my machine ready as in per module 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, no problems then. So, will you say that you understand Azure Virtual Network much more than you did before this module?
Definitely.
Yeah, nice. Okay. So yeah, so we'll stop here for today. Go on. Unfortunately, I've got unfortunately for me, I've got another meeting just right now, so I need to jump off. And then we'll catch up again next week. Hopefully, I've got my exam next week, which I may need to move a little bit further. So if I move it a little bit further, I will need that time to prepare. But hopefully, I'll be able to send you something maybe over the weekend. Okay.
All right,
Thanks
that's
very
cool.
much,
That's
and
cool. All right.
have a wonderful weekend, guys. Speak to you later.
All right, same to you.
No problem.
Bye, David. Take care. Thanks a lot. Bye.